I've heard somebody say before that art thrives within constraints. I love constraints.
Wow.
Because that's where my brain starts to like problem solve around the idea. And that's where you can really start to create. Because if the world is your oyster, you can do anything.
Right.
Well, now you got 10 ideas and they all might be good, but which one do you pursue? When do you pursue it? But when somebody says 6 centimeters is your blade length, you're like, cool, I can work around that.
I love that perspective. Welcome to the very first episode of the Mr. Knife Guy Podcast. We are very happy to bring you a special guest, Ben Peterson of Knafs Knives.
Thanks for having me, Brent. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So what I wanted to do is I've always wanted to interview you. And for people not in the knife industry, probably don't know who you are. It's one of those specialty things like, in wrestling, I couldn't tell you who the big name wrestlers are. But if you are in the knife industry, then Ben Peterson is a pretty big name. You're actually a rock star.
That feels so pretentious, but I've been around in the industry 13 years, long enough to be like, all right, yeah, we've seen that guy before. He's here. He's part of the furniture almost, So yeah, I've been around.
That's pretty cool. I've been around for 25 years, got a few on you, a decade on you, and I'm also much, much older than you are.
Oh, come on, Brent. Give yourself some credit, man.
Young at heart. But what I'm leading up to is that I've had the privilege of knowing some of the dinosaurs in this industry, like Mel Perdue and Ken Onion and some of those big rock star names that, in fact, as a privilege, Paul Boss walked into my store a couple of weeks ago.
Cool. That's awesome.
Here in Southern Utah now. And some of those big names. And sadly enough, we're losing some of those names in the industry. As people age and, the next generation comes along. And it's interesting to see how the knife industry is changing and evolving. And I love seeing people like you who are stepping in and taking that, and a lot of people that you associate with. And I see you do collaborations and being influenced by, and it's the next. And I just kind of want to get your feel and your take on where you see the knife industry right now and where you see it in the near future.
I love that question. I hate that question. I think the knife industry it's evolving quickly. When you look at, I keep saying this over and over, but it's easier than ever to make a knife or have a knife made. It is harder than ever to sell a knife. And where you own a store, you carry a whole bunch of different brands. Brent, you could literally every week of this year add a new knife brand to your mix.
Easily. Because
even within the United States, in China, overseas, the number of new knife brands popping up is astronomical. And I think that's a function of like, you can go out and buy a machine and make stuff in your garage, new knife brand, or you can source things and have things made, new knife brand, right? And so I think what's happening is you can't show up. I saw a Sabenza, like an OG Sabenza from like 1987 online the other day. Somebody posted it. And I thought, wow, that is a really crappy knife. Now, for 1987 standards, it was a great knife. Right. Don't get me wrong. But if Chris Reeve Knives tomorrow came out with a Sabenza that looked like that, they'd be laughed at.
Right.
They can't fly that. So it just, this moment in knives, you have to hit the ground with a really, really good product. You can't show up with a Mickey Mouse product anymore.
It's kind of funny because you'd think after all these years and you walk into a store like mine, see all these different knives, you'd think everything had been invented. It's a cutting tool.
Yeah.
But not. So I'm all excited. I want to get into this. Yeah. I think we should do some introductions and get a little bit of background in history. It was kind of interesting because I went to do some research and do my homework, and you are all over the place. Everybody has got a bio on Ben Peterson on their website. It's pretty cool.
Thank you.
And I really enjoyed reading yours on the Knafs website.
Did you read the big one or the short one?
The big one. That's where I got most of my notes.
I started writing that and I accidentally wrote like 6,000 words. It got wild, man. I was like, all right, we're writing it all down.
I finally finished it. Yeah. So for those of you, again, who may not be familiar, Ben Peterson, he's a knife designer. He's an entrepreneur as like myself. He's an e-commerce and marketing personality. And we're going to get into where you may have seen him before. So his career spans 12 years, probably more now. We're just
13 now, 13. Yeah. This is year 13
years. And he has worked at places. There's this little tiny online knife company called Blade HQ or something like that. It's where it all happened.
It's where I cut my teeth, yeah.
He's also, I was surprised to learn a while ago that you worked for Columbia River Knife and Tool. People now refer to them as CKRT or Cricket.
CRKT, yeah.
Yeah. It's
I
Columbia
did
River Knife and Tool.
2.5 years there. Yep.
I actually got my first dealership in 1999 with Columbia River Knife and Tool.
Cool.
That was my first dealership ever. So yeah, I was surprised to know that you work for Columbia River Knife and Tool, as well as Amazon. And
not Amazon proper. I worked for a business that sold things on Amazon, just to clarify.
Okay. That's good to know. So let's start from the beginning. You were born in Idaho.
I was born in Utah, actually. I was born in Ogden, Utah.
Oh.
Yeah. 1987. Okay. It was a good year. Year of the rabbit. Really? Where'd you get Idaho? ChatGPT pulled that?
Probably. I don't know.
I don't know, man. No.
Okay, good.
Born and raised in Utah and grew up in the Ogden area of Utah.
Okay. Might as well be Idaho.
It might as well be. It's almost there. I got kin from Idaho, southern Idaho. But I grew up in Utah, probably around the age of like 13, 14. I kind of got into video and film. We had one of those old VHS-C camcorders, and I'd film the house plants around the house and film the family. And it was right about the time that like editing was starting to become a household thing. Prior to that, it was all like reel-to-reel, tape-to-tape sort of stuff. And I was like on the front end of like editing at home. And so I got into video. And I thought I was going to make documentaries, and I was in college, made a couple documentaries, and I was like, holy smokes, I'm never going to make a living doing documentaries. And so I started looking around and saying, well, where do you make a living with this? How do you take this idea of video and turn it into money, basically? And so I approached a company, Blade HQ, to see if I could do videos for them for their website. This was back in the days when like, this was 2011, and at the time, you didn't see a lot of online video. It was just starting to break out. Right. Companies like Zappos were putting it on their website. You could like go see every set of shoes.
Pre-YouTube.
Well, it wasn't pre-YouTube. It was right as YouTube was breaking out. And at the time, I realized I went to this conference, and the presenters, it was all about YouTube and how to use YouTube for business. And I was like, holy smokes, my film degree. I might actually be able to use my film degree.
It's kismet.
Yeah. And right then is when YouTube really started breaking out. And so I approached Blade HQ. I was like, hey, could I do YouTube for you guys? And they were like, sure, we'll give you 3 months. And I was like, okay, great. What am I going to do? And I mean, we made stupid stuff. And
I've seen some of the original videos.
Oh, it's bad. I mean, I think we did like this zombie horror flick, and it was so terrible. And we're trying to like sell these like K-bar green handled zombie knives.
Zombie killers.
And it was just really bad cinema. That's the only way to put it. Bad cinema. And the breakout video that like I started realizing, oh, this is how people want to see knives portrayed online was it was actually with a guy named Crockett20. He was doing kind of these adventures videos. It was like the Nut and Fancy era. Like Nut and Fancy was making stuff, and then there were kind of these other guys in the Utah area that were all making these videos testing gear. And so I called up Crockett20. I got to know him a little bit, and I'm like, hey, could we do a collaboration? We took a Benchmade Griptilian out, and he wailed on it. He batoned with it and kind of tried to break it. And that thing took off. And I was like, okay, I get it. And that's probably about the time I became a knife guy too. I remember I kind of fought it when I was working at Blade HQ. I didn't want to buy knives. I was just like passing through. I needed a job, like first job out of college. And I ended up buying a Spyderco Delica because mentally I was like, I have to get into this as a thing. I can't just like float through this. Like
You weren't born a knife nerd like
no, not at all. I mean, I was in Boy Scouts, carried a pocket knife for Boy Scouts. I had a little Gerber knife that I carried EDC'd. This is before EDC even existed. It wasn't even a thing.
Right.
I carried it on a lanyard on my keys, and then it broke, and I never carried a knife after that. But that Delica was like, okay, if I'm going to work in knives, I'd better actually care.
Have a knife, yeah.
Yeah. And for me, that was like this like seismic mental shift, because I was just working a job. And then it was like, no, if you're going to work this job, you better be the best you can be at it. And so I bought that knife, and I realized, okay, this is the culture. You're taking your knife apart, you're sharpening it, you're learning how to use it.
Cool.
And so that for me was like where I started. And for me, it's always been like a business thing. Like I like knives because dang it, they're fun. Nobody leaves a knife store with a frown. Like,
Right.
And you probably see that in your own
All the
store.
time.
Like people walk in, they kind of shop around, they find something that their eyes light up, and then they walk out of the store with a smile. As a marketing guy who likes to sell things, that's the holy grail, man. Like people just like nobody's sad about a pocket knife purchase, right? And so I take a lot of energy and enthusiasm from this industry that is just it's an expendable income thing, and people smile about it, and that gets me jazzed.
Yep. It's kind of funny because during COVID, there was a lot of economic hurt.
Yeah.
And like myself, you kind of flourished during COVID. I understand. It just took off.
Yeah. That stimulus money, those stimmy checks were the best thing to ever happen to
Same
Knafs in
here.
my business.
People didn't know what to do, so they went shopping at the knife store because it made them feel good. Like you said, it's a candy store. So I just kind of wanted to run through brief little history to get people caught up to today.
Yeah.
Where we're at today. And so you were not born in Idaho. Found that out about Ben. You went to BYU. You made a documentary. You actually interned with the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services.
Yeah.
What was that about?
Well, so here I am studying broadcast journalism, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to be on the news. I don't want to produce the news. Don't want to do any of that. And so I was kind of looking around for something that I could. There's this class of videos called industrials, and usually those are like training videos or things like that. Right. And I was like, well, where could I do industrials as an internship? Because I had to have an internship to graduate. And one of my professors happened to connect to somebody in Washington, D.C. at USCIS, Citizenship and Immigration Services. Hard to say that one. And he was like, you could go make training videos for the government. So I went and made like these secure packaging training videos, how to like make a top secret package, and like how to work with like the Office of Legislative whatever in the government. So like it was kind of cool because I got to film on Capitol Hill a little bit. I got to kind of see government in action, or inaction, if you want to call it that.
Right.
Just but it was a great experience to be able to sort of see the world a little bit and kind of understand how government works, and realize I didn't want to work there long term, but I was grateful I could do a 4-month stint there. So
That's awesome.
it was fun.
Have that in your resume.
Yeah.
Okay, so we covered. Talk about your transition into Rocket Ship Wrench. What's that all about?
Oh man, do you want the full story or the short story?
Let's do the short story.
Okay, so the short story is Rocket Ship Wrench is the official name of Knafs, and why it's called Rocket Ship Wrench is because a little bit inside baseball here for just a second. When I was working at Blade HQ, I started Knafs, and it started with a big poster, a 24 by 36 inch poster with everything I knew about knives on it. And when I made that poster, I realized that this was going to be a brand. It wasn't going to just be a
we
product.
actually have that poster in Mr. Knife
Yes.
Guy. If you want to see it or buy it, it is available.
And that's the origin story of Knafs, is I had all of these ideas that I put into that poster. Well, I'm working at Blade HQ, and I'm like, well, I'm starting a brand. How do I make this not look like a brand?
Right.
So we did Rocket Ship Wrench LLC. So all the invoices and everything had Rocket Ship Wrench LLC, which doesn't look like knives at all.
I have to tell you a funny story about that.
Yeah.
So I'm proud to be an authorized dealer of Knafs.
Yes.
And we've had a decent relationship for a little while now.
Yeah.
And so when Knafs started up, I wanted to get right in there and start selling Knafs and supporting those knives and posters and everything else that you do. I got my first invoice and I paid it. And then when I went back into my bank account, I saw this this charge to Rocket Ship Wrench, and I'm like, what is this? Oh no, it's a fraudulent charge. And I couldn't figure it out. I did all this, web searching on Rocket Ship Wrench and what's that? And I was just certain that I'd been charged fraudulently, and finally figured out that, oh no, it was a legitimate.
It was just
business.
us.
It was
just
Ben.
us. But the reason we had that name was to sort of like slip it under the rug a little bit. And like, if on the invoices it doesn't say Knafs, it doesn't look like a knife company, right? Because I realized, like, at some point at Blade HQ, I had more potential outside of Blade HQ than I did in. And that's not a function of Blade HQ being a bad place or anything.
No, not at all.
It was just a matter of like,
your branding and where you fit.
Yeah, like personal branding and being able to spread your wings. And so Rocket Ship Wrench was the official name, and then DBA Knafs, doing business as Knafs. And eventually you don't see a lot of Rocket Ship Wrench out there, but Knafs is the name of the company where we design.
And if I do, I pay it.
Stuff. Yeah. You see it on the back end.
Okay, so you've got this company, you've got this idea, Knafs. It sounds kind of like knives, and it's people who know you're kind of a goofy guy, and that's 100%. Why we all love you. It's because you're fun and out there, and you're not afraid to be vulnerable and expose yourself, and just like we all are. So that's everybody loves Ben Peterson. You get to know Ben.
It's very kind. Thank you.
And you treat everybody the same.
I try to.
That's one thing that I really appreciated, because Blade HQ does millions of dollars a month, I don't know, a month or whatever.
It's a lot.
The volume is just crazy. And they're pretty much online only. I'm one guy, I do a fraction of that, but you treat me as a customer the same way that you treat Blade HQ, and it makes all the difference.
I try to. I look at every dealer as almost like this home base for Knafs, right? Like, volume aside, I don't volume is great. Let's do volume. But at the same time, like,
it's relationships.
And the business in Southern Utah in a way that I can't. I went to school in Cedar City. I went to SUU. It was great. But like, I don't have a home base down here. Like, I don't have a place that I can drop in and film a reel for Instagram or whatever.
Now you do.
I know. And that's like, even like we went to the Netherlands this year and went to an event out there at a dealer. And it was like, we got people showing up to like say hello and show me their knives in their pockets. And somebody showed up in one of our Space Kitty t-shirts. Cool. And I'm like, we're like in the sticks in the Netherlands, and somebody's wearing a stupid Knafs
How's that
kitty.
Make you feel?
Well, it's really cool, because it's that idea of like, there are people all over the world following this thing that we've created. And it's remarkable when they show up and support it. And whether that's in the Netherlands, or I was in China this year, in Taiwan, and people are excited about what we're doing in this space. And that, to me, like, that's really what I wanted, right? Like, I didn't want to just start a little brand that nobody cared about. Like, I wanted people to show up in a Space Kitty shirt and be excited about it. And we're at that moment.
If you're not a knife person and you're interested in getting involved, Knafs is a great place to start.
Yeah.
They've got the stickers, the patches, the merch. We all have it all at Mr. Knife Guy. We try to represent as much as possible. I want to kind of steer into the evolution. It's the exciting part to me. You kind of went untraditional. I guess it's traditional for some people, but you made your first knife. You designed. First of all, let's talk about the banter. You designed a knife for another knife company.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I've had a really good relationship with this company out of China called Wee and Savivi Knives.
And we love Wee and Savivi. They're fantastic, high quality.
When it was probably about 2013 or so, 14 maybe, Wee Knives came out, and what they were doing is they said, we have been making knives for other people for decades. Let's start making our own stuff and make it really high quality, because you had all these American business people going over there and saying, make it cheaper, make it cheaper, make it cheaper. And they came in and they're like, well, we know how to make a good knife. Let's make a good knife. And they did. And so when I was at Blade HQ, and I got to kind of help usher them into the knife industry and be like, no, this is not what we think of as Chinese quality.
So that is an evolution. The Chinese knives used to be the cheap gas station.
Yes.
We call them CCC, cheap Chinese crap.
Yep.
And bad reputation, horrible clones of U.S. knives. And we did something different. They hired U.S. designers
Yeah.
to come in and make good knife designs with high quality materials like Elijah Isham and some really, really big names.
And global appeal too. I think that's because there's a certain style that you have to appeal to the American market. And so I pitched them on an idea. Once I left Blade HQ in 2019, I pitched them on an idea. I said, look, I've got all this sales data in my head. What if we made a knife like this, 2.9 inches, G10 handle, deep carry pocket clip, all these specs, and they made it. We called it the Banter, and it's done.
Why is it called the Banter?
It's called the Banter because we had a show called Knife Banter that we talked about knives, but then the other part of it is it's the first initial of each member of my family. So my name is Ben, my wife's name is Athena, and then we have 4 children, with the
Initial
first
B.
Yeah. Yep. So, and it's, I always try to name knives with like 2 syllables. So it's memorable. And that was a name that I was like, Banter. Yeah, that's easy. So it had a little like family history, personal history, but then also really memorable. You think about all the knife names, the Sendy, the Banter, the Lander, Lulu. They're all
got it.
2 syllables, and they're all a word that you can remember. Yeah.
I love these stories because when I sell a knife, I like to associate a story with it, and then people remember it and something they can tell their friends. So it's not just what are you carrying? It's like, oh, I'm carrying this Ben Peterson, and it's got this little diamond in it. It says WIUG.
Yeah.
So what I like to tell people when they come in and I show them the Banter is that Ben Peterson did Knife Banter for Blade HQ. Was the video series. They talk about knives. And he starts every video with, what is up, guys? Oh, you got to say it.
It goes, what is up, guys? It's a long is.
Yeah, lots of eyes.
There's a lot of eyes in there. And to be honest, the reason I started doing that was it was a mental trick to tell my brain, now we are on camera. Now we are making movies. Because I never wanted to be on camera. Or you got to remember, I was going to be a documentary filmmaker, like behind the camera, like... I never was, even in my reporting class in college, like I hated it. Like I'm Ben Peterson and I'm not the same. Like I hated it, man. There's this really, really bad reel that everyone has to make a resume reel in college. And so you can actually go find my resume reel out there. And it is so laughable, Brent. It is the worst thing I've ever done in my life. And I hated being on camera. So for me, what is up, guys, was like, okay, we're going to make a movie now. We're going to be on camera. We're going to do a good job. We're not going to screw this up.
Okay, give us one. Give us a good one.
So, what is up, guys?
Okay, now we can start the video.
Yeah, and it's a mental trick.
So that's what I would tell people. I'd show them the knife, and it has a little diamond with WIUGs. What is up, guys?
Yeah,
and it has Banter on the clip.
Yep.
Because Knife Banter, this knife was designed by Ben Peterson for We Knife.
Correct.
And it's a great knife. I own one. And then it just blew out. I went to the We website, and I think there's like 16 different versions of just the We folder.
Yeah.
And now you have, or the Banter folder, excuse me.
Yes.
Now you have the Banter fixed blade and tons of different variations on it.
Yeah. So you mentioned Ken Onion a minute ago. When I worked at CRKTA, I got to hang out with Ken a lot. And Ken always, he designs in themes. So he's probably like the most prodigious knife designer in the world at this
If you own a leek,
a
lot of people own a leek. That's part of 4 different knives, the chive, scallion, leek, and shallot.
Yes.
And they're all onions.
Yeah, so all types of, And so I got to hang out with Ken, and he's like, you got to design in themes. So the Banter series, you got the Banter, you got the Baby Banter, you got the Big Banter, the Banter fixed blade. Like, it is an absolute theme and iteration on that theme. I think, so year 5 will be next January, and that's the 5th year since the Banter came out. We're coming out with a bougie Banter, full titanium.
Can't wait.
It's super nice. But I think I've arrived at the point where that series in my brain is probably about done. I think we'll variate on the theme a little bit, colors, things like that. But you get to a point where you've sort of designed what you saw originally, and we're 5 years into it. And I think that I'm about there with all the pieces and parts. But I love being able to take an idea and it's almost like take like a car, right? Like there's a new Mustang every year. And if you start lining them up to each other, you can say, oh, well, this looks a little different from that. And you can see the evolution in the thinking within the vehicle. That's kind of how I see knives. And I think I'll continue to evolve things, but maybe a little bit more slowly. I think last count, there were like 34 different models of Banter out there.
And some guys just collect that, they have to have
some
every
people
single
do.
one.
Yeah, some people do. And there's some weird stuff. We've printed some space cats on the sides of knives and things like that.
So we're going to talk about EDC and modding in a minute.
I love it.
So you designed this knife for Wii, and it became very, very successful.
Yeah.
Still is. You started your company, Knafs.
Yep.
And you designed the first knife that Knafs was going to produce.
Yeah. Lander one. Yep.
The Lander. And you did it through Kickstarter.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason for that is we didn't have any money. And even now, as a small business, we've been in business 6 years. When you go to design something new, it's a lot of money up front that you have to put down on that product. And so we use Kickstarter pretty frequently. In fact, we're
still using it.
Yeah, still using it. We're literally planning 6 or 7 for 2025. New Kickstarter.
You figured it out. A lot of people don't succeed on a Kickstarter, and your first attempt was, didn't you double what you were looking for?
Yeah, so Kickstarter is a funny game because sometimes you set your original threshold pretty low so that you can hit it quickly. But yeah, our first Kickstarter was actually a ruler. We put out a titanium angle finder 6-inch ruler, and I was hoping we'd raise, I don't know, 10 or 12,000. I think we raised 20 on that. And that was my experiment. Everything I do is iterative experiments. So that first Kickstarter was my way to figure out, how does this platform work? And so that was sort of the first pancake, we'd say, right? When you're cooking the pancakes, it's like, well, that one's kind of weird. Turn it up a little, turn it down a little. All right. So the second pancake was the Lander one. And I think on that one, we raised about $80,000 on Kickstarter. And people are just stoked about it. It's a pretty affordable knife, and it's done really well for us. And that was the moment that I realized, okay, Knafs is going to take off. Because I just quit my day job, and we raised $80K on Kickstarter. I was like, okay,
that's phenomenal.
I don't think we're going to starve. It was almost like you go back. You go back. Yeah. You go back to that moment when I was at Blade HQ and wondering, is this going to work? And we had this Griptilian video take off. I'm like, okay, I can see it. I can see a pathway forward in these ideas that I have. So for me, that first Kickstarter was all right, I'm not going to starve, and we can make this work. That was the Lander one for me.
So from my point of view, because everybody loves Ben Peterson, and because of the way that you set things up and got the excitement, you put yourself out there.
Yeah.
People want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And they want to support it. I was very, very happy to be a part of the first Kickstarter.
Cool.
And I have the very first knife. And what's even better about this is that this knife, I think it was released in October of the year. And Ben Peterson delivered this to Mr. Knife Guy in the store. I know this is an audio podcast, but it's also a video. This is the first Kickstarter, and I've actually engraved on the back.
Dude, that's cool.
Kickstarter logo with the date.
9/27/22. Dude, that's cool.
So that's Mr. Knife Guy's personal. I will never part with that knife.
That's so
it's
cool.
A part of history.
You've carried it too. I can see on the pocket clip.
Oh, yeah.
That's fantastic.
It's got some snail trails.
This is the fun to me is this is part of my story, but it's now become part of your story. And I think that's the joy of knives for me is this is yours. It's part of your permanent collection.
And we both do blue. So
yeah, cool. I have a thing for blue, man. I love it.
That's Mr. Knife
That's
Guy's
cool.
color.
I love that.
And then this is the Lander 3.
From Kickstarter,
same
too.
deal from Kickstarter.
Cool. Which one did you get? The black or the Horizon Blue? The black.
I did the black on this one.
Sweet. And you engraved that one. That's cool. And you're putting the dates on there. That's a delight.
Yeah, because I won't remember if I don't.
See, that's cool. And see, I look at the date this came out, and I'm like, oh man, that was a rough day. The thing about anytime you make a product, you're dumping life into it. And so I could tell you 20 back end stories of this knife that made it really challenging. And some of them are just the challenge of making the Kickstarter and personnel challenges and workflow things and when it came in versus when it didn't. And there's just, you dump life into the thing that you're making.
Your soul.
Yeah, you really do, because nothing comes easy. I think that's one thing, again, it's so easy to make a knife, but it's so hard to sell a knife. I look at this and I'm like, holy smokes, the amount of brain power to just have this in your hand. Like we designed the box and we redesigned the box, and that one has a sticker and we changed the sticker because the stickers weren't working. Like all of these little things, and you're like, oh, how does anyone ever get anything to actually work? It's pretty miraculous in its own right.
That's cool. And just, I mean, looking at the two knives, they look very, very similar, but there's a lot of technical differences between them, from the locking mechanism and the opening mechanism and the materials and
Steel type. Yep.
Yep. All that.
Yeah. And again, that's me saying, okay, initially we were shooting for a price point. We wanted to be under $60. And I think the original Lander one came in at 58 at the beginning. And then we were looking at it going, well, this is great. What about improved materials? Like it's a nice size. And
there's knife snobs out there like me.
Oh yeah,
that won't buy anything that doesn't have quality materials.
Yes, absolutely. And from there we get to play with it. This is the brand new, I'm holding in my hand, the Lander 3 clip point with
I just
paper
had
micarta.
somebody come in with that.
Yeah, and that's
to the store for sharpening.
Nice. Did they come in with a Lander 3 or a 2?
I can't even remember, but it was the same Spanish micarta.
Yeah,
what I like to call that.
That's a good name for that. Spanish micarta.
Paper micarta.
Yeah, it kind of has that
Protect.
Is that what they call it?
Yeah, Spanish micarta.
Interesting, because it's definitely like this old, almost like California trail sort of Spanish vibe to it. I like that. But yeah, so it's taking the original and then changing it around and playing with it.
Thanks. And you can see it's got a different
blade shape. So this one's a clip point versus a drop point. And this is the joy of knives. Like if somebody's listening and they're like, well, why are these guys talking about knives for 30, 40 minutes on this podcast? You can get so nuanced into the thing. And that's maybe what I enjoy, is like existing in that nuance, right? Like if you're into off-roading, you could probably sit there and look at like those over the tire bags, the little garbage bags that the Jeep guys put on the back. Right. You could probably like spend an hour talking about the stitching and the different.
It's like, everything. People don't get why knives.
Yeah.
You know, why knives? Why are you so obsessed with knives? But it's like anything. It's how guys accessorize. I have to tell you a little story. It's kind of funny. When I first met my wife, that was the thing. You know, I took her to the Blade Show in Atlanta.
Amazing.
And she goes, well, yeah, I guess I'll go. I'll bring my laptop in case I get bored. And at the end, I was pulling her from table to honey. There's all these other, you know, and she's like, ugh.
Yeah.
At first, she's like, why do you have so many knives? You know, you've got a box, you've got 200 knives. Why do you have so many knives? I don't get it. And I'm like, well, you've got a box over there with 200 pieces of jewelry.
Yeah.
She goes, I get it.
Yeah.
That's how men accessorize.
Yeah. And it's the nuance of the thing, right? Like somebody will get a knife and they'll say, well, I don't quite like this. And it's, I made
everybody's different.
Yeah. A comparison the other day, like if you were a caveman, you're like probably always looking for the perfect stick or the perfect rock. And as soon as you find it, you're going to stick it in your little pouch and you're going to use it till it breaks, or you're going to be like, I actually want the rock to have different edges. And I think that we're all a little bit rock hunting for something that really sings to us and that we really enjoy. It just so happens that our rocks at this point are high performance steel and materials.
Steel.
Yeah. I mean, it just so happens that we have advanced well beyond that rock phase.
So there's a lot to know and a lot to understand. So I got some questions for you. You doing okay?
I'm great.
All right. This is great. I love talking with you, Ben. What's something you'd like people to know about you?
Oh, I've never been asked that question. That's a good question.
I'm trying to be original.
No, I like that. I think maybe one thing, let me relate it back to video. I put out a video this year. So last year I went to the Amazon and I got to test some of my knives in the Amazon. And I filmed a bunch. I came home with probably 12 hours of footage and I edited it down, and I was planning on it being a knife video. But by the end, it was not a knife video. It was about humans. And I think maybe the part that I would hope people understand about me is, yes, knives are part of it. But knives for me are all about humans. It's all about that connection with another human being. So in a way, I'm a documentarian still. I became a documentarian telling stories with people. And I guess my hope is that people don't just see me as Ben the knife guy, but Ben who cares about your life and what you're doing. I think, that would be my hope. And hopefully I can live up to that too, because I think there's an expectation there for me to live a good life and to actually care and not just lip service things.
Awesome. That's beautiful. You do give off that vibe.
I try to.
So
thanks.
that's good. So that kind of goes in. My next question was, what do you want to be known for, your legacy? And that's probably a big part of it.
Yeah. I mean, like I've heard people say, and this is going to sound slightly pretentious, but I'm going to then follow it up. I've heard people say Ben is the nicest guy in the knife industry, and I don't know that is true.
No, it's Dave Peterson or Dave Wattenberg.
It is Dave Wattenberg, but I might be a close second. But no, really, I think that if you can be known as a good human being, that's good. I mean, sure, let's make stuff that lasts, and 100 years from now, somebody can pull out Dave's knife and be like, oh, this is a ProTech from the Dave era, or this is one of Ben's early designs, or whatever. But really, like, I don't think that ripples through generations. Like, were you good to people? Were you kind? That is what I would hope echoes through my career and long after I'm gone. Was this guy kind? Did he create value in the universe?
That's awesome.
You know, so that's deep. Wow. We're going deep today, Brent. I like it.
There are a lot of really, really nice guys in the industry. They're very warm and inviting, and people want to share their knowledge and help the next generation come up.
Yep.
There's also some a-holes, but
there are.
That's in every aspect of life.
But I would say that your percentage of nice guys to tools is
high.
It's probably 95%.
I would agree.
Great people.
Yep. So where do you see the knife industry going? I know you have your own vision for Knafs.
Yeah.
But as a whole,
I think that this is an interesting moment, and I'm watching Montana Knife Company really closely because I'm fascinated by this direct-to-consumer model that they're just like on this meteoric rise.
I love it, and I hate it as a dealer.
Yeah, because you can't buy it as a dealer.
Right. And everybody wants it.
Everybody wants it, and it's hard to find. And I think that's a fascinating moment because what they've done is they've tapped into this influencer marketing. They've tapped into Joe Rogan and Meat Eater and all of these different podcasts and different things. So they've sort of tapped into the creator economy with this knife brand. And that to me is fascinating. And I'm curious to see if it holds, right? Like, do they get to a point where their production is high enough that they are calling Mr. Knife Guy and saying, hey, do you want to carry Montana Knife Company? You say, absolutely. I've been trying to carry it for 10 years or whatever.
Because that's traditionally how it's working now.
Correct. So they've upended
Not
the way
with
that
them, but
the way that your traditional retail works, your brick and mortar and your online retail. So it's interesting to me to see this meteoric rise of a direct-to-consumer brand. And I don't know that that's where the knife industry's headed, but maybe my observation is it's headed toward disruption.
Right.
I would
call
fragmented disruption, where Montana Knife Company is a disruptor, in the sense that like Benchmade is suing them, right? They're in this lawsuit because of this meteoric rise and employees going from one place to another and that sort of thing. We did a whole video on that lawsuit, but it feels like this moment where things are evolving and they're evolving quickly. And you look at like, if some of these tariffs come into play, how does that change the landscape? So it feels like a moment where knife brands and knife consumers have to be dynamic. You have to be able to think on your feet. And I don't think anybody knows where it's going.
It'll be interesting to see.
It will be. But I think the word that comes to mind is dynamic. It is a dynamic moment within the knife industry. And that to me is fun. Every day is a little different.
Right. Plus you have laws on top of that.
Oh, yeah.
That are dynamic and different everywhere.
We're working on a knife right now. There were some legal troubles in Germany this year with a tragic event there with somebody did a knife attack in Germany, and some of their knife laws are potentially changing. And so for us, we're looking at that and we're like, well, we do business in Germany. Right. How do we adapt to that?
Right.
Do we make a blade under 6 centimeters? I don't know what that is in inches, but do you be dynamic, or do you just say, oh, well, we
There's
don't
a whole
want
slip joint thing?
Yeah. Do we want to?
Europe
Yeah.
is a completely different knife market.
So I enjoy that. I enjoy even like Boston and Chicago, right? They have a 2.5 inch blade length. That's where the baby banter came from.
Government workers
here
in Utah are not allowed to carry a knife on the job over 2 inches.
Yeah. And that, to me, creative constraints are always a fun place. And take the legalities out of it, personal freedom, whatever, like take that out of it. Look at it from just a creative perspective. I love creative constraints. When somebody says, you have to make this movie 2 minutes, I say, okay, cool. And it forces your brain to cut out all of the stuff that doesn't matter. And it's the same thing with knife design for me. When somebody says, this has to be under 6 centimeters, okay, well, how do you design a handle that works with a 6 centimeter fixed blade?
A locking mechanism.
Yeah, it turns into a creative challenge. I think I've heard somebody say before that art thrives within constraints. I love constraints.
Wow.
Because that's where my brain starts to like problem solve around the idea. And that's where you can really start to create. Because if the world is your oyster, you can do anything.
Right.
Well, now you got 10 ideas and they all might be good, but which one do you pursue? When do you pursue it? But when somebody says 6 centimeters is your blade length, you're like, cool, I can work around that.
I love that perspective.
So I enjoy that.
That's really good.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, is Knafs ever going to do an automatic knife?
I love that question. No plans at all. And that kind of goes back to part of our ethos as a brand. Automatics are inherently aggressive, and you might disagree with me here.
I disagree with you.
Well, so think about it this way.
Holistically, you're correct.
Yeah. So from a sound perspective, from a visual perspective, you look in the movies, what are they using? It's an Italian stiletto switchblade.
What's interesting is in England, it's illegal to show an automatic knife opening on screen.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
You can hear the sound, but you cannot see it visually.
Oh, and that's fascinating. And again, I'm not here like as a legal anything. I kind of just flow with what happens, right? Let's let the legislatures figure that out. And obviously let's have a voice in that. But me as a business owner, I'm like, okay, what looks aggressive? What feels aggressive? To me, watching a knife open is a little bit aggressive. And I don't think that makes it bad. But Knafs we've designed it to be a soft entry into knives. We've always been an education company, right? So our first product was an educational poster. When you hand somebody a ProTech automatic and it nearly jumps out of their hand, that's a pretty dang hard entry into knives. Yeah. And there's a place for that, 100%. But for Knafs, I look at it and I'm like, do I want to have a soft entry or a hard entry into knives? I think in some ways, Knafs should be the place where you move from your gas station knife to your first knife. And then if you're like, sweet, I want to try an auto, man, go buy a Microtech, buy a ProTech, right? I could see us maybe someday making one. The team asked me this probably once every 6 months. They're like, when are we going to make an auto? And I'm like, well, I hate money. And so, because they're a great moneymaker. Like people get excited about them because
I just got an idea for a collaboration, Ben.
Yeah. What is it? An auto. But see, I've talked to a few people over the years. They're like, turn your lander into an auto. And I'm like, kind of goes against the ethos of what I'm trying to create.
I understand that. And you're absolutely right, because people who are uneducated, and Mr. Knife Guy is an educational company as well.
Sure.
Tagline kind of is, whenever you come into Mr. Knife Guy, you're going to learn something.
Yeah.
Because we've got, all this, quarter of a century anyway. And that's the thing. There's this persona or this demonic perception of knives as being a weapon rather than a tool.
Yeah.
And people are, knives are scary.
Yes.
If they're uneducated.
Yes.
And so I see exactly where you're coming from with that.
But I think maybe I would sort of add to that. There are design cues that make something look and feel aggressive, right?
Right.
You look at a tank. A tank is designed to
intimidate.
It's designed to be impenetrable, and it's designed to be tough. And you end up with these harsh angles, and you end up with these things that make something feel aggressive. I mean, even in the animal world, right? Like you look at these, you guys down here have these like horned toads with like these spikes on them, and they just look aggressive. Like that's part of their defense mechanism. And then there are other creatures in the animal world that look absolutely non-aggressive, although they can be, right? And so I tried to design in this space where it's a soft entry into knives, and there are plenty of brands that look absolutely aggressive, and there are plenty of knife lines within companies that aren't aggressive, And I'm trying to design in a space where people can come in and feel like, oh, This is not an aggressive tool.
That's great. And like I said at the beginning, if you're new into knives and you want to become a collector, or at least even just get your first everyday carry, EDC, Knafs is a perfect place to start.
Thank you. And you can buy it at MrKnifeGuy.com.
You can buy it at Mr. Knife Guy.
Think about that.
So let's see. I'm going to ask you a really hard question.
I love it.
And I hate this question.
Yeah.
I hate it when people ask me and I can never answer it. What are your top 5 favorite brands? Knife brands.
Knife brands. So I kind of put them into different categories. Very, very high up there is Spyderco. I love the way they do business.
Okay, we're going to split off and explore that a little bit.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But as far as like Spyderco knives themselves, not my favorite at all. But as a company, I'm like, oh, this is amazing.
Perfect.
I love the James brand. I love the way they have created a brand that is so, when you talk about a non-aggressive, just like out of left field kind of brand, that's the James brand. I love Wesson for the same reason. WESN. 5, huh? Other brands that I really, really like.
So if you don't have 5, that's
no.
okay.
I love ProTech mostly because I love what Dave has created on a brand
From
level.
a small family-owned company.
Love that. And then maybe my 5th, man, it's hard to like, we talk about these big knife brands, right? But then I have these small knife maker friends. Like I look at like Lucas Burnley and TJ Swartz, like what they are doing with their brands. And I'm going to lump them together because they have a podcast. They collaborate on different things. I love what they're doing, not just within knives, but within their entire personal brands and things like that. So the thing is, I know the owner of Benchmade, and I know like TJ Sports, who barely moved out of his 1-car garage. Like I love that range where you're going from like $1 million, tens and maybe $100 million companies to like guy in his garage, like making it happen. I love that. That to me is the most interesting part of this industry.
Cool. I love the way you answered that because it wasn't your top 5 favorite knives, but brands and what they represent.
Yeah.
So that's great. So what would you say to somebody? I have people come into the store and they want to buy a knife, but they don't want to spend $200-$300.
Yeah.
Which you could easily do. But they're very hesitant to buy a knife made in China.
Yeah.
What would you say to that person? 'Cause I know there's different reasons.
Yeah. It's complicated. Here's the deal. I went to China this year, in part to answer that question for myself, and I'm still answering it. Is buying a Chinese-made knife a sin? Is it bad? Are you supporting the Chinese Communist Party? I think those are big questions, and we could do 3 hours of podcast on that.
And you can rationalize it any way you want.
You can. Here's my thing. There are humans trying to make a living in China making knives the same way that
good people,
good people, the same exact way that we're trying to make a living here in the United States. Is their money going to the Chinese Communist Party? Absolutely. They pay taxes, right? If they don't pay taxes, they don't have a business. Same as us here in the United States. And so I think if you look at it on a human level, you can pay $150 to $250 on up to buy an American-made knife. We sell them, we make them. I think that's great. It's probably made on a machine with Chinese parts. You probably drove to the store in a car with Chinese parts in it. For some reason, people they apply this weird filter to pocket knives. But if you got to buy an air filter for your car,
good point.
You know, and so I'm not trying to rationalize it. Put your money where your mouth is. Like if you do not want to buy knives made in China, don't do it. It's going to cost you more, and that's okay. Like put your money where your mouth is. But also, you have to recognize that you're cherry picking. And if you're cool with that cherry picking, I'm cool with that cherry picking. But if you're going to gripe about it on your iPhone, right? That's my thing. And I think that,
I love that
you can't take an entire country of 1.4 billion people and say, these guys are bad. That's propaganda, right? You have to say, these guys are complex, the same way the U.S. is complex.
Yep.
And
that mentality has split our country.
it has. And I think if you can look at other human beings and say, you are complex and I am complex, and let's meet in the middle with our complexities. And maybe you go to your house and I go to my house and we don't play in the road anymore together. That's fine. But I think that being able to recognize each other's complexities and meet somewhere in the middle is probably what we need to do as humans generally, right? And so that would be my recommendation with somebody who doesn't want to buy a Chinese knife is
Love it.
Analyze your own complexities and then vote with your dollar.
That is fantastic. We're getting close to an hour, and this has been an awesome conversation with Ben Peterson. Just going to look at my notes and see if there's anything else. Is there something that you wanted to talk about or say?
Oh man, you covered some really good things. I think maybe if somebody's made it to the end of this podcast, chances are they're into knives already. But if you're not, it's a fun little corner of the world.
If you want to be edumacated, come see Mr. Knife Guy or Ben Peterson.
Seriously, I have made a lot of friends in this industry. And I don't say that lightly.
It's good lifetime friends.
Yeah. I mean, we were in Denmark. We went to the Netherlands and then we were in Denmark. And this guy named Kenneth that I met on the internet came and picked us up from the airport. He's a knife guy. He's an EDC guy. I think a lot of people have found a lot of great friendships around knives and this hobby. Somebody asked me the other day, they were like, well, we were having a conversation around the office, and I was kind of lamenting that knives don't solve any of the world's problems. That we're not doing world peace. We're not doing clean water or anything,
You're creating tools.
You're creating tools. But I think maybe the problem that we're solving in knives is loneliness. It's solving the problem of friendship and community. And that to me adds a lot of meaning to what I do.
Because nobody else wants to associate with us knife geeks.
Yeah, well, or we're a bunch of weirdos that needed a place to land, and knives are such a welcoming community, and that's what I enjoy about it. So if somebody's gotten to the end of this and they're not into knives, find a community that is good for you and wholesome. I think knives are wholesome in a lot of ways, and I enjoy it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I do have a small rabbit hole.
I love a rabbit hole.
So there's different types of knives. I kind of categorize them into, we have kitchen knives, culinary knives. And I think here in Southern Utah, if I only sold kitchen knives, would do very, very well. There's a huge foodie community, and that's a whole nother avenue that is completely different. And then we have your hunting, outdoor, bushcraft type of knives that is yet another whole completely different.
And I'd even put hunting and bushcraft in different categories.
They are. Yeah. They actually are, because you're using different materials and different shapes and different uses. And I think it all comes down to the use of the knife.
Yep.
And then your tactical and EDC would be, do you see Knafs venturing into any of the other categories, like maybe a paring knife, kitchen knife, or?
Do you know?
Because the Lulu, I would put more leaning towards that bushcraft.
Oh yeah, it's through and through a bushcraft knife with a Scandi grind on it and stuff. I wish, Brent, if you came to my kitchen and looked at my kitchen knives, I would be ashamed. I wish I had more interest in kitchen knives, because that's an entire, like, you think about the number of people that will buy a pocket knife versus a kitchen knife. Right. It's astronomically higher in kitchen knives. And I wish I had a bug for that. I don't. I wish I did, because there's good money there. And I was literally in a factory in Taiwan this year, and I'm watching them make kitchen knives, and I'm like, why aren't I doing kitchen knives? It's because I don't care about kitchen knives. It doesn't have that same enthusiasm for me personally.
Or you probably don't cook.
I do cook a little bit. I'm kind of the sous chef at the house.
Okay.
I'm the guy. Yeah.
And you don't care about kitchen knives?
I don't. Isn't that strange?
That's crazy.
I think, but I would say generally within the knife industry, if you go to a blade show, your ratio of kitchen to everyday carry, everything else, is probably 5% kitchen, maybe 10.
I mean, because there's some huge big names like Devin Thomas and
sure.
I could go on and on and on. And that's
maybe I should be looking at kitchen more.
That's something to think about.
Yeah, it's hard for me
because you don't have enough to focus on right now.
Oh yeah, I need another project in my life. But I wish I had an interest in it. Maybe that comes with time. I don't know.
it's another thing. You just have to jump into it and dig, and because it is, you know, the materials are different, and I'm proud to be an authorized shoe dealer.
Yeah.
And I'm really into it.
Yeah.
You know, I love taking care of all the high-end chefs here in Southern Utah and making sure that their tools of the trade are top, you know, top working condition.
I told my wife one day, I'm like, hey, I will get us a good set of kitchen knives as soon as we stop putting them in the sink and as soon as we stop running them through the dishwasher.
I actually created a magnet that says, Mr. Knife Guy says, no knives in the dishwasher. Yes. And you put it right on the front of your dishwasher.
Yes.
So don't put your knives in the dishwasher.
Oh, it's
you
terrible
will destroy
for
them.
And I think maybe that's why I'm not that into it, is like I'm watching my kids like ruin my kitchen knives. I'm watching my wife. Yeah. Love my dear wife, but she puts the kitchen knives straight into the sink, and they just get like, you're bungling the edge every time a dish goes in there. And so I think for me, the practical application of kitchen knives, absolutely, but the interest, not so much yet.
I get it.
But maybe one day, you never know.
Anyway. Well, Ben, I really appreciate your time day before Thanksgiving away from your family to come and talk with us and to share your insights. And it's been informative. And I really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Brent. Thanks for having me. Always good to be down here.